For my fourth political commentary, I will be discussing the issue of human rights problems in Tibet and China. China has been plagued with human rights problems for decades. I agree that China do have human rights problems, but so do every nation in the world. To start off the topic, let's start with the problem of censorship. Many believes that any form of media in China is filled with censorship and propaganda. The word propaganda is somewhat misleading. Let's find out what it means. The definition of propaganda is information given to the people for them to believe in what the government wants them to believe. Propaganda may hide the truth from the general public. However, the purpose of propaganda is generally in the best interest of the nation and its population. Every country does it. I don't think any country does it more or less than another. Simple example. During World War II, American propaganda was everywhere. The purpose was to glorify the war to recruit the young generation to help to fight the war. One can say that with the help of propaganda, the US recruited a formidable army and won the war. Isn't that a good thing? Some propagandas are outright lies. President Bush's accusation of Iraq's possession of weapons of mass destruction was a lying propaganda. How come the weapons were never found? But Iraq was invaded anyway. It is said that the victors write the history books. So one may argue the Chinese may be censoring too much about the history in Tibet. Then if we were to completely ignore the history books written by the Chinese about Tibet, then where are the Western historian point of views on Tibet? Where are the historians in the Western nations? How come none of them are speaking up? How come I don't see any scholars and professors being interviewed on CNN or BBC or CBC about Tibet history? How come we don't receive much information from the academic world? If we take a step back and think, maybe the media doesn't want them to tell everyone the true history of Tibet. Isn't that a form of censorship? There's never such a thing as 100% successful censorship. Someone is bound to speak the truth. There is one academic who talks about Tibet on YouTube. His name is Professor Michael Parenti. He has a very clear understanding of the Tibet history. Please look him up and watch his interviews if you have a minute. Let's move on to the subject of the cultural freedom of the Tibetans. First of all, many people claim that Tibet is somehow ruled with an iron fist by the government. There are many false accusations I hear on how ethnic Tibetans in China are treated harshly, how the government is ruining the culture by flooding Tibet with Han Chinese. I frown upon such false accusations. To clarify things, let me share with you some solid statistics about Tibet. In the province of Tibet, the population consists of 93% ethnic Tibetans. Only 6% are Han Chinese, and almost 1% are Muslim Hui. In the city of Lhasa, Han Chinese only takes up 17% of the population. 1.5% are Hui Muslims. 83% are ethnic Tibetans. So Lhasa has the largest concentration of ethnic Han Chinese. Most of the Han Chinese there are working as public servicemen, school teachers, or small-scale merchants. Tibetans are clearly the ethnic majority there. There was never an influx of Han Chinese in the province of Tibet, because there is no reason to move and live in Tibet. The place is rather isolated and lacks business opportunity. Simply put, the Chinese are definitely not destroying the culture in Tibet, and simply because it's not possible and there's no reason for that. Many people falsely believe the Tibetan culture is being killed off in China. Well, let me give you some insights regarding that. In China, there is a law prohibiting any citizen to carry a blade longer than a certain length. This law exists in many countries in the world. In a developed city, one do not need to carry a large blade with them. There's no reason unless you want to hurt somebody. However, the Tibetans have a tradition to carry a large Tibetan dagger with them as a symbol of family prestige. The dagger is usually inherited from generations above and is regarded as a treasured item for the family. The government made an exception in the law for the Tibetans to be able to carry their dagger on the street in China, just to preserve their ethnic tradition. How is this not giving enough human rights? France have banned the wearing of the Islam veil for women, yet China allows Tibetans to carry lethal weapons in public. In China, there's one-child policy. Many people knows that. But how many knows that this policy do not apply to all the ethnic minorities? What more can you expect from the government? How much more leniency can you get? So let's look at the human rights problems in the entire China. The world criticizes China for many human rights problems. I have listed a few common ones. The world condemns China for executing a large number of convicted criminals every year, having too much media censorship, and a lack of freedom of speech. Well, let me give you some explanations to those things. First of all, China executes the murderers and those big-time offenders because China cannot afford to keep all those criminals in prison where they get free food and pay-per-view. This is different compared to a country like Canada, where the pig farmer Robert Picton murdered more than 40 women, yet the law says that he deserves a fair trial for every murder he committed, and over many years of trials, the cost for the Robert Picton case rose to a couple of $1 million, all provided by the tax money from the good lawful citizens of Canada. All he ended up was with a few bunch of meaningless life sentences. He still gets to live in shelter, not having to worry about the next meal. In China, if the lawful citizens are starving, the serious criminals do not deserve to live. It's simple as that. The West believes that there is no freedom of speech in China. This, however, is incorrect. The term freedom of speech is all too relative. If you were to talk about assassinating the president in any country, you'll be arrested. That's true in every country. There are millions of Chinese people who criticize the government and badmouth the Communist Party on the internet in China. And no, they don't get all arrested. I mean, freedom of speech is all relative. Freedom of speech is everywhere. But people have to take the responsibilities for what they say. So, those are so-called human rights problems in China the West usually brings up. Let me tell you some real human rights problems in China. Many of those problems may very well exist in the society you live in right now. Number one problem. The value of human life in China is unequal. Throughout history, this happens when there's a large social gap between the rich and poor, the powerful and the powerless. This cannot be avoided because the economic boom in China made the rich extremely wealthy and the poor struggling to survive. People rely on networking and bribery to get things done. Anything is possible in China if you know the right people and have the right amount of cash. The people in power sometimes go too far, exploiting the people without power. For example, corrupt local police task forces illegally set up roadblocks collecting fees from passing vehicles all the time.